Welcome, friends. Welcome on The Barricades. This is your most exciting Eastern European leftist political show. I am Bojan Stanislavski. I'm your host, and today with me is the co-host, Maria Chernat. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you for having me, Bojan.
Right, and now to our special guest, Todor Todorov. He is a Bulgarian philosopher. He is an author of books and articles. He is also a frequent political commentator on the Bulgarian media. Welcome to the program, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Hello.
All right, and let's dive straight in. April 4th, elections, general election in Bulgaria, parliamentary election. The outcome, surprising for some, unsurprising for others. Definitely, there's been some very, very emotional reaction throughout the Bulgarian society and throughout the Bulgarian, let's say, commentariat, regarding the results of the election. So, I want to start maybe with the request that you kind of tell us what is the landscape after the election and after the results are in place, and after all the votes have been counted, and let's take it from there.
Okay, first I want to say just a few words on the ideological map of how it looked like just before the election, so that we could explain what really happened and why. Because as I see it, in the Bulgarian political stage, ideologically speaking, of course, we know politics is not just about ideology, but let's start from this point. Ideologically speaking, we have one huge cluster of political bodies or political subjects which consist of one substance or similar substances. That is to say, we have GERB on the one side. Then you have also, it may sound a little strange, but the Bulgarian Socialist Party and the movement for rights and freedoms, and the party of Slavi Trifonov, who basically share one common ideological line or agenda, and it is the patriotic, nationalist, neoliberal, political substance. Although for the Socialist Party, it may sound a bit strange, but they took over this nationalist, pathos of speaking and producing political messages. They took it over. So you don't have much of a choice from an ideological point of view. You have these main political subjects, but they are made of the same substance.
Same plastilene, basically. But before you continue, let me just make it clear for our viewers and readers, particularly from the West, that might not be aware which party is what in Bulgaria. GERB is the currently ruling political organization led by Boyko Borissov, who's been the prime minister of Bulgaria for the last, 12 years or something like that. I'm sorry, I've lost the count. and then there's the Bulgarian Socialist Party, which is the party that is the successor of the Bulgarian Communist Party before 1989, which I agree with you. Unfortunately, it is just a party with a right-wing pro-business agenda and socio-culturally conservative. So yeah, I guess that they do share some kind of common ground in terms of ideology. It's a fact, of course, that ideology does not play any major role here, which is also a factor that we could discuss a little later on. And then there's the DPS, which is the Movement for Rights and Freedoms, which is just an oligarchic structure made up of developed by.
It's a corporate party. Yeah. It's not ideologically. Their identity is liberal. They're part of the liberal.
That's how they present themselves. Exactly.
But they're basically a corporate body. But I just want to explain a little bit more on what you just mentioned. I mean, okay, GERB, they also play on this nationalist, patriotic, strings, but at the same point, they are also more European oriented, but not because of their convictions or
Yeah, of
ideology,
course.
but because we have to do what the bosses in Brussels, they want us
Exactly, but
to do
that's
that.
not
That's
only
why
that.
we support the
But I
Istanbul
also,
Convention and so on.
that's true, but I also think that it's important part of their legitimacy. I mean, up until a
Sure,
few months ago,
sure.
up until the violent moments during the demonstrations occurred in Sofia, Gerb and particularly Boyko Borissov was able to present himself, and sort of that was his agency, that was his legitimacy, that he's the face of Europe in Bulgaria. Him and his party, which
Yes.
of course, I mean, this is a beggar's belief. Okay, I mean,
Okay,
the only
I just want to go on with what I
sure,
started,
please go
because
ahead.
all these parties at their core are populist parties. GERB was also a populist party, although they became part of this right center, Christian Democrat family and so on. But at their core, they're a populist party. The Socialist Party, which is a very strange case, which deserves a little bit more comments. Well, the thing there is that, as I used to say, at the time when in most countries of Western Europe, let's take Germany as example, appeared this kind of populist movements which have strong social, agenda, but at the same time they share far right convictions like AfD, Alternative für Deutschland. So they became pretty strong at a certain point. We had the similar phenomena in France, in UK, and so on. So why didn't that happen in Bulgaria? Well, my answer is because we have the Bulgarian Socialist Party, and they get this kind of electorate, they get these votes, they have this ideological substance which they offer. They became more rightist, more nationalist and populist than socialist. And what these votes proved is that Slavi Trifonov, who is a famous also TV anchor and singer, who made lots of concerts, filled stadiums and so on. So it shows up that the fans of Slavi Trifonov are more than the people who vote the Socialist Party, which was the second or first, in the last decades, it was a strong political subject. So that's one point I want to make. Then the other thing which we have to consider, because there have been pretty dramatic comments. What shall we do now? This is a very complex situation. It's very complicated. Nobody can make a cabinet on their own. Nobody wants to make a coalition. So it seems that maybe we had to new elections. But what I want to say here is that we don't live in the 90s anymore. It's not the time of when you have a political subject who sweep the elections. Like once there was the United Democratic Forces with all the romanticism and everything.
The remnants of them are now with GERB, by the way.
Yes, but what I think is now we reach a situation which will be formally normal for the next, maybe, I don't know, decades. I mean, in the next years, I expect that we don't have such a party which will have a strong majority. This parliament, in the next one, next one maybe, will be more diverse. It will include more different parties, so it won't be able for a certain political subject or for a certain party to make a cabinet on their own. It's like it was, if you remember, in Germany some time ago, when the social democrats, they were basically stunned after the leadership of
Gerhard Schröder.
Gerhard Schröder, like Tony Blair, what he did to the Labour in UK. So you had very, very close, but then still these broad coalitions ruling for some time in Germany. And we have a situation like that. Nobody can make a cabinet. And this will be, formally speaking, the new normality of our representation.
Yeah, I think that's quite possible. Sorry, I just want to say that perhaps it makes sense for us to actually explain what the results are of the elections, so that people get an understanding why are we speculating on whether they are going to be able to form a cabinet or not, and that the first, the winner, let's say, quantitatively speaking, is GERB, okay, because they got the majority of the votes, but then not enough votes as to form their own, government. Like, just they don't have, the majority isn't big enough. Then there is the new party, led by the singer, con artist Slavi Trifonov, okay, who just became over the last 3 decades. It's like he's almost like an institution in Bulgaria, okay? And also we can later talk about the weird slogans, because his party is called "There Is Such a Nation," and some people on the left in Bulgaria, they kind of joke that his campaign was "There is no such a virus," which is, but yeah, we can talk about that a little later. And the astonishment comes from the fact that his party is now the second biggest force in the Bulgarian parliamentary politics, and only the third place, the third position is for the Socialist Party, that traditionally, as you explained, traditionally for Bulgaria was a strong and important political factor, and now somehow has to step down to some kind of strange formation, okay, that doesn't really have much of a strict, concrete political and ideological corpus that can put forward. So and then we've got the smaller parties, like the movement for rights and freedoms that we mentioned, and also the kind of the organization that was born during the protests, okay, last year, led by Maya Manolova. Which she's not a new person in Bulgarian politics, but she's leading the kind of again, the name is weird because the Bulgarian political process is weird, I guess. So it's kind of supplementing each other. Stand up, mafia out. I guess that would be the translation
Or
of
Gangsters
the name.
Out, but let me just say something about the name of this organization, because I think they just took over a name that was used in Germany by Sarah Wagenknecht. She started a movement called Aufstehen or something like that, as far as I remember. So it's the same in Bulgarian. So they took it, I guess, and the slogan Gangsters Out or something like that it started basically from the president during this protest. But I don't consider this body a political party or movement or thing, because just yesterday they started fighting and splitting, because they are made of very different people. There you have Maya Manova, who is a woman with political experience, but she was one of the people who supported Delian Peevski at the time when this problem sparkled.
Now she's against the mafia. Yeah,
and it's a strange thing. Then you have the so-called poisonous trio that was organizing the protests, and these people are they don't have a clear program or strategy of what to do. So one of them said, we have to unite with GERB and the socialists, we need their votes in the parliament. And then Maya Manova said, but no, we can't do that because we will be ruined. So it's a strange thing. But you missed one or a party that is part of the parliament. It's a very interesting topic. It's the democratic Bulgaria.
Oh, right. Yeah, one of my favorites, by the way, actually.
They made a huge impact. I mean, they won Sofia. Like half of the votes in Sofia are for democratic Bulgaria. They beat GERB in the in the capital, and also in Plovdiv, one or the second biggest city in Bulgaria. So they did pretty well. The thing with democratic Bulgaria is that they are more, at least in Bulgarian media or in Bulgarian, language, they are presented as like a kind of a center right party taking over this aura and mythology of the middle class citizen, the bourgeois, modern, you know, pro-European, liberal, and so on.
Yeah.
But if you take it, if you view it from the Western European, you know, perspective, this party would be will be described more properly as a leftist one, because they also have a green agenda, you know, left liberal. I mean, in this sense. So they are a bit of a strange thing, but they are supported mainly by younger people, by the intelligentsia, and ideologically it's a mess. But you see, in Bulgaria, everything ideologically.
Yeah, we don't have a normal political process. That's very important.
You know, I think why this is the problem, why this happens, that we have this kind of a stir up, and because we don't have a leftist subject on the map, because the Socialist Party is not a leftist party for some years already, because other leftist parties, they are just, you know, micro organizations that there is no party that could present itself as a modern liberal leftist. And I think this is where it gets really wrong. And then you have a very strong populist patriotic wave with Slavi Trifonov, GERB, the Socialist Party, even DPS, you know, at a certain point, because even when the socialists they send this you know, kind of a populist messages, but I don't believe, I mean, the neoliberal agenda and the connections to business interests are pretty strong with the socialists. So it's ideologically, it's a complete mess. And the absence of a leftist subject, I mean, imagine if there was really a party made up of a more, you know, younger generation, like democratic Bulgaria, but with a strong leftist appeal. I think they will gather a lot of votes.
Right, let's discuss that a little later, but I want I wanted Maria to give you a chance to ask a question.
Thank you. It took a while, like 20 minutes. So, well, I wanted to ask the following thing. How is it that these protests that lasted for so long in Bulgaria were somehow galvanized and were leading towards this media figure and not to a leftist, you know, party, political party? And how do you explain this sudden rise? I mean, I was joking with you before the show started, saying that, okay, you moved from the bodyguard of Zhivkov now to a singer. So from a bodyguard who is Boyko Borissov, an ex-bodyguard, to an ex-singer, that's progress, I would think, because, you know.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. But how was it? I mean, first of all, why do you think that no leftist political force was able to take, you know, the anger of the Bulgarians that was so obvious during the protests and transformed it into some sort of electoral gain? And why and how do you explain this sudden rise of this media personality to power?
Well, let me just start. I see three questions that you asked me, but let me start with first with this. The thing is, there is no leftist party. I mean, really representative and capable of, you know, taking a huge part of the votes. And then during the protests last summer, believe it or not, but the Socialist Party didn't clearly support those protests, although they were all the time developing an anti-GERB language. They didn't support those protests. They didn't go with them, and they didn't use this energy. So it's a kind of a strange thing. I believe that well, you ask me about the left, but there is no leftist party. I mean, in the really modern liberal sense of this. And then there is no sudden rise of anyone. Slavi Trifonov is a very popular personality in Bulgaria for 20 years or more. I'm not sure. He was like he started in the 90s, and he went into this political genre already during the government of Ivan Kostov, when he was doing a satire against the government, and he started playing this opposition game, you know, because his show was then thrown off air from the national television for some reason, and he played the cards of, you know, uh, we are now there is this censorship, so we go on with this show, and he started bringing in more and more politics. So people, you know, support him because clearly he has very populist messages. Like, for instance, he says, let's make the MPs in parliament half to what they are now. They are 240, so let's make them 120, which means clearly that the representativeness will go lower, and there will be just 2 or 3 parties in the parliament. So it's not a very democratic thing. But people believe that, you know, if we have the half the deputies, there will be less budget spent on people in the parliament. So people love him because there are simple messages, very patriotic, very nationalist, and this language is really very strong now in Bulgaria. It's adopted by people who I consider intellectual. I just a few days ago, when the elections happened, and after that I was watching the TV studios, and there was this guy Luben Dilov, who is you know, son of a very famous also a writer in Bulgaria, and himself a very intellectual figure. Now he ran for parliament on the ticket of GERB, and he was asked a question about Slavi Trifonov, and he said, you know, he is a great Bulgarian. I don't know what this means, and why do you use a language like that when you are smart enough? And I mean, obviously he knows what he's talking about, and why is he using this kind of figures. He's a great Bulgarian. So Slavi Trifonov is very popular for some time already, and now he just founded this party, and he took part in the elections, so that it became obvious that his fans or his followers are more than the people who would support the Socialist Party, which is a paradox, or maybe it's a natural
personally, I'm not sure whether it's so paradoxic. I mean, sorry, Maria, if you want to continue your thought, I will weigh in a little later.
Thanks. Well, there is a saying, you know, then when you talk a lot about nationalism, somewhere something was stolen. And usually that's a saying that emphasizes the thing that basically this very bombastic, you know, and extravagant uses of words, patriotism, nationalism, are meant to cover up for economic disasters. So do you think this would be a good assessment?
Do you know what the engine of nationalism is? According to me, the whole engine of this patriotic political language is resentment. It's resentment. Is that people feel miserable for some reason, and they want to blame somebody for that. And clearly, the whole patriotic discourse, which is I must admit, it's a kind of a, you know, Eurosceptic, because what it says, it's a very simple message. It says, okay, look at Europe. Europe is you know, a homosexual. It's a gender. I don't know. You know, it's gender politics and all these things. They want to erase our nation. They want to erase our identity. They want to turn us into something else, you know, third, fourth, fifth gender, and so on. So it's a rhetorics of resentment. You know, this is kind of a so you use this negative energy and stick to your tradition, to your roots. It's a very strong thing. It's not only a Bulgarian. And by the way, because you mentioned that we moved from a bodyguard to a singer, but it's not a Bulgarian phenomenon. It's something that happens in the global politics. We see it in the United States. We see it in the United Kingdom.
Mhm.
That is the people's resentment against politicians. So people who come from the political, area, who are professional politicians or whatever, and people choose, uh, you know, people coming from outside of politics, like Donald Trump, like Boris Johnson, and people like that, who basically say, we are not politicians. These politicians have been lying to you the whole time for decades, and now it's time for our revenge, it's now our moment. We start a new era. We bring on a new politics, a new language, a new way to deal with things, and so on. And it's a very simple message. It's a very simple communication. That's why it's so successful.
Yes, I would think so. Thanks you, because I'm also thinking about Trump and how this media, and also about Ukraine and how such a media personality over there took power
We had
using
it also in Italy. I think in Italy there was this
that's
comedian
right.
guy who was very successful also.
So Boyan, if you want to,
Right, right. I just, well, first of all, I want to thank you for this comparison with the West, that it's not our invention. I mean, the degeneration of politics and the kind of the ideological degradation in general, and this destitution, I guess I should say, is something which is to be observed throughout the global North, really. And I guess that, that's a fact. Like, we had this bodyguard. I mean, we still have this bodyguard figure, and this gangster, Boyko Borissov, and so on and so forth. And it's a shameful thing, okay, that this is the legitimate leader of the Bulgarian nation. I mean, for me at least, it's very uncomfortable. Then we have this Slavi Trifonov, whom I've never. But by the way, I have to say that, full disclosure, I've never had a pinch of respect for him. Okay, neither for his vocal productions or his ideology or kind of semi-ideology that he's been propping up for the last years, and so on and so forth. But that's, and of course, the fact that it now became a political factor is also uncomfortable for me, and it's also uncomfortable for me that one of the oldest and the most traditional socialist parties on the continent, okay, the Bulgarian Socialist Party, which is which has been founded over 1 century ago, is now a right-wing party. It's all very annoying and very, very kind of provokes all kinds of weird emotions. Okay, and honestly, it sometimes even makes my blood boil. But this is not something that is unique for us, because we are this wild people who live on the Balkans, and we cannot organize our own state and our own political life, and so on and so forth, which is Western narrative, by the way. Kind of
but this
forgotten
is
over the last
exactly
decade.
what I was saying, with the patriotism that usually is economic distress and pressure, and
Right.
people, shift. And
Yeah.
nationalism is a way to perfectly cover up, this kind of distress that is provoked by neoliberalism, and then you take the patriotic discourse and you scapegoat some
That's
minority,
right.
and you solve the problem for some time.
Yeah, exactly. You postpone the problem. You don't actually solve it, but you postpone it so you can, you can do your theft, okay? Because basically the Bulgarian political life and the Bulgarian socio-economic life, if you like, is not something that you can exactly compare with the West. That's why I said in the beginning, we don't have a normal quote-unquote political life, okay? And a normal quote-unquote economy, okay? Because basically the entire political life in Bulgaria is well, political life is one thing, but the economic life, is basically theft. I mean, everything that's been going on for the last 30 years is just, oligarchic circles stealing, what's been produced between 1945 and 1989 during the times of the People's Republic of Bulgaria. And it's we are correct, I think, to criticize capitalism and to say that, austerity, neoliberalism, capitalism, that has destroyed Bulgaria over the course of the last 3 decades. But on the other hand, we have to be aware of the fact that it's not capitalism like people understand it in the West. Okay, because those people that are our business class, okay, had they been thrown for 5 minutes into any kind of proper business environment, they wouldn't last 5 minutes.
It's like more a feudal kind of capitalism.
Yeah, oligarchic, maybe colonial. Some say colonial. I mean, we can argue over the.
Just because you mentioned this, really nobody is speaking against capitalism or about the deficiencies of capitalism.
Yeah,
and I mean, we're living in a time with a brutal neoliberal, policies, and in a situation where, for a leftist party, it's like a gift from heaven, and it's unexplainable why the Socialist Party didn't take a course, a very harsh or more radical leftist course, because the situation, any perspective you see it, is like, if there is a real leftist subject, it will gain a lot from that.
And absolutely, you're totally right. And this is the paradox of the Bulgarian political life, because I described the economic one as absurd, and the political one is absurd as well, because for the last 3 decades, the Bulgarian society has been crying for a left, alternative party, and the only thing that it was offered was all kinds of, a variety of right-wing agendas. Okay,
but you have to keep in mind that all this time, you have this huge, giant body of the Socialist Party, which made it impossible for a modern leftist liberal party to emerge or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's another question. That's another question, because here we touch upon another problem, which is the ideological collapse of the left, and this is a very, very big problem. Not only I'm not talking only about the pathologies of the Bulgarian Socialist Party, which became, as I told you in the beginning, I kind of acknowledge this. Okay, despite the fact that I do have some kind of, I recognize this party being part of my tradition. Okay, because as I said, like it's an old party with huge traditions and some great moments in its history, but now it's just a right-wing party, and the problem is that now, if we want to have I'm talking about 30 years after the changes and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to come forward and build a viable left-wing party, then you really got to offer people something. And we've seen one left-wing project after another, even in Western Europe, where there's been much more tradition of, what you refer to as the modern left, failing. And why did they fail? Because the only thing that they were able to offer is, we're going to depart from austerity, and we're going to recognize all the 77 genders and all the rest of it. That's too little. That's not inspiring anymore. No. And I don't believe it's inspiring in Bulgaria either. That's why I don't think that any kind of modern left-wing group would actually take root in Bulgaria. What I think, and that, I don't want to debate it now, but I just want to sort of put forward my opinion, that I think we need modern left, but we need a modern anti-capitalist left that is going to challenge the system in a very wise way, in a very educated manner, in a very kind of political and inspiring way, with a romantic message.
Yeah, but the problem with Bulgaria is that we got capitalism in a bundle, in a package with democracy. Yeah. So that in people's consciousness, capitalism and democracy go together hand in hand, although it's not the case, because you can see that capitalism is at its peak in countries with more authoritarian governments. And it's not at all this direct connection between capitalism and democracy, but people, have this, kind of a complex from the past, the socialist, period, which was a totalitarian, and so on. And then the capitalism and democracy is, something that you cannot really reject. So this is a problem in Bulgarian rhetorics. But if you allow me to broaden a little bit the context of this problem that you mentioned, this kind of degeneration of politics, the emergence of these figures like Trump and so on, which is generally speaking the phenomenon of post-politics. This is a new kind of way of doing politics. It starts somewhere like maybe in the 70s, and Christopher Lasch is one author who describes this whole phenomenon, calling it the culture of narcissism. And what he claims is that during the 70s, there was a new generation appearing in the West, he speaks mostly about America, but also the Western Europe, which is really disappointed, and this generation lost all the possible authorities. Like in contrast to the generation from the 60s, which produced these countercultures, the hippies, the protests. Let's change not only the system, political or whatever, but let's transform life itself. It was a cultural, revolution. And in the 70s, there is this new generation that is really in despair, and it doesn't believe anymore in the authority of religion and church on one hand. Then it doesn't believe in the authority of the family. On the other hand, it doesn't believe in politics anymore and in politicians, because it despises the politicians. It thinks all politicians are demagogues, are liars, are people who are, doing fraud and so on. Then these people don't believe in grand narratives, in ideologies, in social movements or something like that. They don't participate in such projects. They don't believe in social projects and ideologies. So they turn to themselves, and as a kind of a compensatory mechanism, they start doing everything for themselves, for their personal care, taking care of oneself, going to the fitness room, doing some diets, jogging, and so on. So what happens, it is my hypothesis here, what happens is that all this generation after the 70s, they don't believe in economics anymore, because, the market is starting to crumble. There is the first major crisis in the United States in the 70s. People don't believe that the future will bring us something better than the past, and so on and so on. But what happens politically is that these new kind of politicians, this new generation of politicians that's appearing now, they play exactly this thing. You see, they send messages that they don't have this context, this grand political context. They don't use ideological tools or whatever. They send simple personal messages. And that's what these people like, because they understand it, because it relates to their everyday life and to their interest. And it's a completely new way of doing politics. What we are thinking about is still, these grand narratives, ideologies, parties, and so on. But these people are not interested in that anymore. I mean,
well, I think it's disputable, but finish your thought and I will tell you why.
No,
I just have a very short remark.
The thing is, all these traditional parties, look what happened to the socialists in France. And it's like many places in Europe, parties with huge traditions, are in crisis. And you have new subjects being born, maybe parties who will be today, tomorrow there will be another one, and so on. Because politics is something like, anything goes. It should be flexible. It should be not ideological, but more everyday oriented, and it should be a
lifestyle.
Fears, yes, the lifestyles of people, and mostly their fears. It's the politics of fear, which transforms into grandiose, postures and messages. It's
right.
It's
so I just want
to.
Yeah, please go ahead. Like I want to just respond to that, but yeah, I can do that a little later.
Please do, because I also want to respond. But you
okay? So like first, I want to say that in general, I agree with the analysis that we do have a general problem. Okay, that is, the ideologies, the narratives, they stopped kind of working. People stopped caring about them, and I think it's quite justifiable that they sort of have this nihilist attitude towards it, because, well, it didn't give us much. Okay, I mean, it used to give us much, but then we had this period since the 70s, pretty much, since the oil crisis, and since the emergence, well, not the emergence, but since the application and popularization of neoliberalism. And I think that neoliberalism is to be held accountable for that, because neoliberalism is what actually broke the camel's back. I mean, it destroyed the social fabric. It kind of failed in all aspects. Okay, economically, morally, politically, in all aspects, it was only pure destruction, pretty much everywhere where you look around. And I think that the fact that all these traditional parties, like you mentioned, for example, the French socialists, right? Like they subscribe to that idea. The German Social Democrats, they subscribe to neoliberalism. The Labour Party subscribe to neoliberalism. Okay, so that's why they are failing. I mean, it's not just the fact that people are kind of more interested in their own individualistic lifestyle. The fact is that they are prompted to do that. Okay, and this is, I personally think it's very dangerous, because when you combine it, and Maria could speak about it a little more, when you combine the kind of culture of narcissism, social media, or as I call them, anti-social media, the kind of individualistic focus on whether it's comfortable for me or whether it's not comfortable, or whether I want to have a family or not, and the decision is being made because like on the basis of whether it's going to be comfortable for me, this kind of stuff. I mean, this is all a presumption. This is all, I mean, this is producing a new culture, which I don't like, because this is a culture where you don't have communities, where you don't have organized societies, or where you don't have organized, communities, but you can just, people are individuals and you can grow them, okay? Like you can, like on a farm. So this is, and why is the question of the complete fall apart and the departure from grand narratives questionable? Well, because the right wing is doing that. And the right wing has been pretty successful doing that, particularly in our part of the world. Like, for example, when you look at Poland, where I'm based right now, why is the party, the currently ruling Law and Justice, Catholic, fundamentalist, neoliberal, right wing, a bunch of scums, why are they still ruling? Well, that's because they are the only force that kind of takes care of trying to demonstrate to the Polish people that they are, by voting for them, they are emancipating themselves. Of course, it's an entirely falsified message. There's I mean, I could speak about that for another half an hour. I'm not going to do that, but I just want to say that the right wing is doing that, and in many countries, to some successfully, at least to an extent. Okay, so I think that what the left should do is try and at least replicate that strategy. And of course, the left would be much better at it if it had a real program for a real change, not just saying, oh, we're going to manage it better. But I'm just sort of throwing that in order to sort of demonstrate that I am personally optimistic when it comes to the fact that the left could win if it only would have wanted to.
Can I just elaborate a bit on what you said, because when I listened to you, something came to my mind. First of all, and you said that kind of, I think that what we have is all the major political subjects, they don't offer an alternative to the ideological or the main political stream that is applied, which is a neoliberal, and it's a really radical kind of neoliberalism. So that's why even the socialist parties don't offer that anymore. Since the time of Tony Blair, maybe even before that, they don't offer this kind of a alternative or a new vision for a different society, for different relations and so on. So that's why you have this new subjects coming up, populist movements who kind of try to articulate this kind of alternative. And that's a problem. And another thing is, because you mentioned that it was the neoliberal wave which started in the 70s, which is maybe guilty for destroying this ideological, I don't know, this politics of ideologies. But I think the left is also at least to some degree had some guilt in that, because what happened in the so-called new left, which appropriated new agendas after the compromising of Soviet system and everything. So they abandoned some of the fundamental ideological, messages of
Yeah, I
socialism.
agree. I agree.
And they started going into this LGBTIQ and minority identities, politics of identities, and so on. And that turned many people away. And especially in societies like ours, this doesn't play well for leftist party. Abandoning the strong ideological message, which says basically, capitalism is a corrupt system which produces a society which is sick, which produces politics and political stage which is corrupted, and we should talk about that.
Yeah,
And the
it brings out
neoliberal,
the worst in people, also very important.
yes, it's also anthropological moment in that. It's humanity that is being molded and transformed into something monstrous and ill, and nobody talks about that. People don't want to hear about gender, or I don't say that it's not an important topic. It is, especially in
But you
society.
can't run on this, not in Bulgaria,
But in Bulgaria, it is very important. I mean, we are not the most tolerant society.
No.
People are not very enlightened about feminism and so on. Let's admit that. But it is important. But you have to keep this strong message. And the left, all across Europe, at a certain point, it was like in the 60s and the 70s, they abandoned this discourse, and they started trying to shape a new face for the left, a more human, a more, trying to distance themselves from the Soviet kind of socialism. And this, at the end, played, a bad.
Didn't work out quite well.
Well, I wanted to make a few comments on what you said. Well, I very much agree that nowadays the political landscape is dominated by personalities that say, look, politics is a lifestyle. But the only issue that I do not agree with is that you presented it as it surfaced just like that. While in fact, if you study history, you see that basically after Roosevelt came up with the New Deal in 1934, the National Association of Manufacturers that basically gathered all the major businessmen and companies in the United States plan to organize a coup and then plan to dismantle the idea that politics is the engine of progress in a society. And they hired Edward Bernays, for instance, just after World War II to organize World Fair, where they organized this dome with the Democracy City, where you could see corporations that would bring progress to the American public. And it captured the imagination of the American public, because you would see in Detroit, it was organized, and you would see future technological advancements that would finally lead, of course, to democracy and social progress. First of all, so it was a very well planned and organized effort to topple the welfare state and the idea that we have a society of classes, not of individuals. And if you think of the 1947, the Montpellierin Society and Friedrich Hayek and all the people that he gathered around him to support, like the ones, one of his collaborators in the Montpellierin Society was also editor-in-chief in the New York Times and the Financial Times, important journalists that were basically hired in a common effort, to destroy the welfare state. And it was Margaret Thatcher that said, there is no society, only individuals, the first thing. But what is very interesting is that the elites, they have a class conscious. Only us, only the public, have to think of ourselves as individuals, as separated individuals. They meet in Davos, all the time, the elites and the wealthiest and the most powerful, and they act like a class.
They have their bulletins. They even have, like, Financial Times is not a normal paper. It's the bulletin of the international bourgeoisie, basically. Sorry for the jargon.
Basically, yes, and they basically act like a class. It is only us that have to think of ourselves that there is no alternative, just to quote Margaret Thatcher again, okay, and that there is no society. They worked and they fought tooth and nail with all the ideas that were put in place by Roosevelt and other social democrats to create the safety net and workers' rights, and all the things that created a stable society for 50 years, starting from 1934, okay? So it was not like it appeared out of the blue. It is a war, but people are not aware of it, you know. And there are these ideas that are promoted right now. It is a complete disaster. I mean, Roger Schwarzenberg had a wonderful book, the spectacle or the show politics. It was initially published in French, and he discusses this way of transforming politics, you know, into a show where all that matters is a media, you know, that you are appealing to the media and you are likable. You don't send a message, you collect, you know, likes, you collect emotions. You don't send messages, you collect emotions, and you collect, you know, this collective how do I say, you get to be liked by the public. You don't send the public, and it is not the public itself, but the public's desires that you are aiming to manipulate, you know, and it is the public desires that you want to tackle with. So this is the main problem, and this is why I would say it is not surprising that you have this media, you know, personality that was quite famous, and it was so easy because just think of it. I mean, it is my interpretation, but Todor, I don't know if you agree, but I think in the 90s, it would have been very difficult for a popular singer to become a politician because people had in mind the idea that politics has to be something serious. Am I wrong?
It was a quite different. It was a quite different climate, I think, in the 90s, and there were still this, you know, ideological warfare, and you know, there was a more or less clearer line of division then, and I don't know if it would be possible then. I mean, it was just when after the end of the century, or the beginning of the new one, when it became obvious that the traditional or the established political subjects have lost, you know, authority, and people started supporting new populist movement. It was how the King's Party succeeded, then GERB in a very similar way. And I mean, we're living in the era of such, you know, populist phenomena. But I wanted to comment something else on what you said. I just forgot my point. It was about you saying talking about the welfare state, and how this changed politics. Of course, what you mentioned is very important. Margaret Thatcher with the statement about individuals, because a radical individualism appeared in the context of this you know, culture of narcissism. It's the idea that it's the individual, we are very individualistic, and so on. And this is pure ideology, of course, and that it makes possible a discourse like that, which fragments society, which makes people feel helpless, and at the end, it absorbs and it you know, uses their resentments, because people are really lonely, they feel abandoned, they feel helpless, and that's how this resentment appears. And then this resentment can be transformed into a kind of a new political energy, and that's what is going on. But on the other hand, the corporations that are fighting this counter revolution, because neoliberalism is a kind of a counter revolution from the top against the bottom, the counter revolution of the rich, who took back what, you know, the welfare state was able to, you know, to take from them, or to you know. So the corporations, they fight the welfare state and the Keynesian policies when they feel well, but in a time of crisis, they take from the state whatever is possible. You see, in the situations like we had in 2008 or now the COVID crisis, the corporations are taking help, you know, bail out.
Socialism is bad unless my company can get funded.
Yeah, and that's how all the vaccines appeared. The vaccines are not a product of neoliberal competition. They are not product of the free market. They were produced because they were funded by public funds, by governments.
Same goes for the Silicon Valley, by the way, which was a major strategic investment by the American government a long time ago.
Yes. So it's a myth, you know. This is a whole a grand mythology of neoliberalism, that it's everything is you know, a kind of the success of the individual or the market and so on. And it's a very simple lie.
That's right. Okay, look, we've been talking for quite a long time now, and I think we've touched upon many topics, and I wish that we could actually continue this discussion. I think that we definitely haven't exhausted the the questions regarding the Bulgarian situation, because there's a lot to be told, by the way. And I think also, I mean, what you said about how people became disillusioned at the break of the century, or like late 90s, I think that it's also important to remember that this disillusionment was predecessed by something that could easily be compared to what is now largely referred to as colorful revolutions in 1996 or 1997 in Bulgaria, where people were massively lied to, and they had put all their hopes, you know, in
fantasies. They had fantasies.
They had fantasies. You're right. Absolutely, you're totally right. And I think we should discuss the question of fantasies and political fantasies in Eastern Europe, and particularly in places like Bulgaria. Yeah. That's something very curious. So, I want to thank you, Todor, for joining up and for analyzing the situation in Bulgaria, and for making all the other points on ideology. And thank you, Maria, for doing the same. I want to wish all our viewers all the best. Stay healthy, and we're going to be back, the three of us, hopefully, to continue the discussion sometime soon. Thank you.
Subscribe to our channel, go to the Patreon page, because we need your support.
That's right.